All right, Battletech enthusiasts and fellow mech warriors, we've got some incoming Q&A here. Ancient mechs, primitive mechs, inner sphere mechs versus more advanced mechs, in this case possibly the clans, or looking at restored tech, this idea after the clan invasion when a lot of the mechs got upgraded, and of course the different time periods and tactics across the entire inner sphere. So one of the great things about Battletech and the interesting things about Battletech that I find is if we're talking the physical miniatures, and I'm going to pick a Stalker because it's a great mech to illustrate this idea. When are we playing that Stalker? What is the time period? Is it Inner Sphere? Is it kind of Star League? Is it after that where the clans have, clan tech is a lot more readily available? So now you've got ER lasers and pulse lasers and various targeting computers. What time period? So while we see similar mechs, there's a difference in how you pair them up. And while the tactics are somewhat similar, there is a significant shift in the focus of the game in terms of when you're going to make your move. And that's what we're going to explore in this vlog. So I do have two mechs in my collection. I've got a Mackie and I have a primitive Shadowhawk. And I initially purchased the primitive Shadowhawk. This was one of the older Ironwind sculpts, the reseen, unseen, seen again type thing. I picked it up because I really liked how it looked. And I was playing it as a regular Shadowhawk. But then at some point, it might have been in a Battletech campaign, I was going to play it for the narrative as a primitive Shadowhawk. Primitive armor, primitive fusion engine. And it was a little bit slower, a little bit clunkier, had less armor, had some quirks, but at a reduction in battle value. And while certainly those were deficiencies, it was still a mech. So it was still able to do all the things that a mech could, and it was still able to function with the weapons that it had. On a side note, in the campaign, being primitive tech, as we were out there kind of in certain areas as mercenaries, it was easier to repair and cost less. Now, can it hold its own one-on-one against a more modern battle mech? Well, that's back and forth. But I say that because essentially what you're looking at, and we see this with the first clan encounters versus Inner Sphere, if you're playing the invasion period, it's the battle value. Primitive mechs, less effective mechs, non-upgraded mechs, they're going to be a lower battle value. Versus clan tech, or again, going back to that Stalker, jump in with a Stalker, start upgrading the weapon systems, and watch the battle value climb. This idea of balance. So what that means is you're going to be going in to the game with more stuff on the table. Even, and I'm not talking about like trying to flood the table with lights and mediums, whatever type of units that you take. Let's just say mechs for right now. Let's keep combined arms out of it. Although that doesn't change this tactica too much. Mechs versus mechs. If I've got primitive, if I've got inner sphere, you've got clans, or you've got upgraded tech, I'm going to have more stuff on the table, especially if it's clans. What this means is at the beginning of the game, I am at the highest power level. I am at the best that I'm going to be because I have, in theory, more weapons on the table. Now, of course, depends on the configurations and the mechs that I take and range. But in theory, I'm going to have more mechs, more weapons. That's going to give me greater dice pools. We talked about this in a previous vlog that I pushed up to the Wargaming Tactics. I'm just going to mention it because it does have value to check out. Literally, if you put down like 3 mechs on the table as an exercise and get a bunch of dice and put dice next to those mechs for the weapons that they can fire, those are your dice pools. That's what you have. You're going to roll those dice and hopefully hit, and there's modifiers. So this idea of the dice pools, you're going to have them for your mechs. You're going to have initiative. You're going to outnumber, and you're going to have more weapons, generally speaking, than, say, clans or higher tech. Now, as the game progresses, of course, you're going to be under a tremendous amount of firepower. Maybe you've got primitive armor. Maybe you've got primitive mechs. I mean, there's still a battle mech, but it's going to be less armor. Maybe you're a little slower. Likewise, if you're facing pulse lasers, ER lasers, and just clan tech, they're going to be able to hit you harder, faster, and at range. So what this means is as the game continues, you're going to start losing mechs pretty fast. And of course, your Tactica is going to help slow that down. But the game is going to shift as you move through the beginning of the game to the mid game to end game, where you're going to take more and more losses. You're going to lose your dice pools, and you're going to lose the big initiative advantage. So from that perspective, the clans are going to start to become more and more powerful, or upgraded mechs are going to become more powerful. What this means is if we break the game up into the start of the game, mid game, and end game, you need to be I'm trying to think of the word to capture it. Hyper aggressive, hyper motivated, committed, right? You just can't kind of hang back and fire off an LRM 5-pack and dance around. Like, no, you have to be like, this is where we have to go. This is what we have to do. Commit, make it happen. From that perspective, you need to leverage the advantages that you have, because at the beginning of the game, you do have them. Mid-game, things kind of balance out. And once it switches and you start taking more and more losses, that's where you're going to get into serious trouble, and you're just going to get absolutely slaughtered, and you're going to say, what the heck, this is absolutely insane. Now, on two side notes, just to kind of finish it out, to round it out, and I say if because, Battletech has a lot of different rules that you can play, Inner Sphere assumes this idea of force withdrawal. We're Knights of the Realm. Battle mechs are very, very expensive, very, very rare. If I take some internals, or my mech is crippled, usually I'll be allowed to power down, unless I'm a mercenary company or something like that. Likewise with the clans, that's if it's Inner Sphere versus Sphere. Clans, from the perspective, will issue challenges. And once you issue that challenge, you have to lock onto that mech, or if something fires at you, challenge accepted. That's to kind of balance out the power, where this idea of I just can't have one mech blasting everything away. On a side note, don't make that mistake. I was playing a summoner. A spider mech just runs across. I start blasting it because I'm like, I'll cripple this thing in one turn. Forget what we were playing for a second here because we played so much Battletech. Well, now I've issued a challenge because I fired on that target. That spider was running away the whole game. So literally all the battle value of my summoner really can't do much. Vehicles usually don't count for issuing challenges, although maybe if it was like a behemoth tank or something, we could have that in the narrative. So I say that because with this divide, this is what's interesting about Battletech, in that it is a high-tech game, but unlike, say, Warhammer 40,000, I say Warhammer 40K because it's a game that I enjoy tremendously, the tech level, put aside Horus Heresy for a moment, the tech level in Battletech in 40K, is static. It hasn't really changed that much, and you just kind of play in that time period. They might introduce some new weapons, they might change a few things, but it's locked. Battletech is literally a living universe. Take that Stalker, going back to that Stalker, put it down on the table. When are you playing that? Star League, First War, Second War, clans, after the clan invasion. It's got some Comstar tech. Has it got some Lost tech? It's got some experimental tech. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do that is going to change and affect that mech. So just kind of focusing on that. On a second side note, jumping into combined arms for a little bit, the biggest thing that you want to maintain is initiative. Because again, you're going to kind of outnumber the clan mechs or the higher tech mechs. And once you lose initiative, things kind of really get you into trouble. So taking some infantry, right? You've been listening to my vlogs. You're like, Fritz is going to work in infantry somewhere, right? Or maybe some battle armor or something like that. Taking some infantry not only can contribute to the battle a little bit, but rules as written, and I'm not against house ruling. Rules as written is going to count each infantry stand as an initiative point. That means you can lose initiative. You're always still going to be moving your mechs last, or critical pieces where a clan mech is forced to move first, and maybe you can isolate it, or you get into trouble and there's somewhere to hide, like City Fight, City Tech, you can jump out and get out of there. So that's a lower battle value way to build in a little bit of an initiative cushion to utilize from that perspective. But an excellent question, and one that you see this especially as you jump into the clans versus Inner Sphere, you start coming across this. It's an interesting shift. It's an interesting paradigm how the tech levels, it's not just the mechs, it's not just the combined arms, it's the tech levels that change Battletech. But even fighting with a primitive force, and you're going to get hit and arms are going to blow off and it's going to be pretty intense. But even with that, understanding the tactica and the flow of the game, you can make it happen.